So I want to welcome everyone to our NBO Presents today. I'm Pam Morton. I'm the Executive Director of the National Basketry Organization. For any of you who tried to join us last week, I'm sorry about our technical difficulties. I don't know what I did or didn't do, and I'm just glad that you all have rejoined us this week. I'm excited to have you here for today's NBO Presents, a studio tour with Charissa Brock, hosted by Lindsay Ketterer-Gates. Charissa will show us her studio and her bamboo grove. So I hope you enjoy it. My cat will meow. Please feel free to use the chat to let us know where you're from, and please use the Q&A to ask any questions. I will be monitoring both of them, and so will Lindsay get to the Q&A later in the presentation. Some questions may be answered during the program and others will be answered at the end. As you can imagine, these webinars have a financial impact on NBO, so I've put a donation link in the chat, or you can go to nationalbasketry.org and just click on the donate tab. We appreciate your donation of any amount. And with that, I'm going to turn the program over to Lindsay and Charissa, and I will be hiding myself, and I will see you at the end of the program.
Thanks so much, Pam. And
Good.
Thank everyone for joining us tonight. Tonight on the East Coast where I am. I'm really excited to be able to get a chance to show off Charissa's amazing work. And as you can see, just from the background of her screen, her studio is fantastic. Charissa, thank you so much for agreeing to be with us tonight and give us kind of a behind the scenes look at your work and your career as an artist. We're really looking forward to it.
Yeah, thanks.
So I want to say it's been about 20 years of us knowing each other and getting to know each other, showing in venues where our work was considered contemporary basketry. And over that time, I've really enjoyed getting to learn a little bit more about the amazing range of processes that you use to create your work and the interesting backstory of how you got to where you are with the combination of materials that you use. I did put in the chat for everyone to be able to read your bio that you provided us with. But for anyone who didn't read, Charissa started out in a household where her mother was a very well-known, or is a very well-known glass artist. And Charissa, you went on and ended up studying glass. Is that correct?
Yeah, I kept flipping back and forth between the fiber and glass department in undergrad, and finally landed in the glass department before graduating. I just couldn't make up my mind what material, and it turned out it was because I was supposed to be using several materials together in order to create my work.
And then was there one final thing that ended up making you flip and decide that you would do your MFA with a focus on fiber art?
Well, in undergraduate school, I was building structures with natural materials that fell from trees, and I was creating molds out of those to cast glass. And at some point, I realized that through a couple, studio mishaps and such, that the objects that I was making out of the natural materials had more impact and power and joy in them than the final product of the glass. And so I just started working with the natural materials after that. And I was putting them together in repeated patterns. And I started to realize that that was something that is done in basketry, where things are repeated, patterns are created, and ways of tying and binding and creating tension are incorporated in order to create a three-dimensional object. And I slowly came to the realization after, I guess, a couple visits to Sybaris Gallery in Royal Oak, Michigan, that I belonged in the basketry realm.
And I imagine when you first started working with natural fibers, that bamboo wasn't your first go-to material. Can you talk a little bit about, when did you discover bamboo, and was it love at first sight with that material, or what was your journey into using that?
So I was in grad school, and it was the second year of graduate school at Tyler School of Art in Pennsylvania. And I was making work out of leaves and sticks and seed pods and tree bark. And I was trying to think, am I going the direction of making temporary installations that the photography is the important part of the work, or am I making objects? And are there more materials which are not quite as ephemeral as leaves that I could be using? And I had taken I was going to take a workshop with Patrick Dougherty out in Aspen, Colorado. And I got on an airplane and looked in a magazine, and Dorothy Gills Barnes was in there, and she was using a bandsaw. And I was like, oh, if Dorothy can use a bandsaw, so can I. And then I got to the workshop, and we were working with really long tree saplings and learning how to bend them. But there were also power tools in the workshop. And so Patrick showed me how to use the bandsaw, and I experimented with the drill press and the belt sander, and I was hooked. And I thought maybe wood was it. And then I got back to Tyler, and I was preparing to teach an off-loom construction class, which is basically basketry, and to students. And I wanted them to have the experience of gathering materials from nature, because I just find it to be, it's just such an energetic feeling to be able to gather your own materials and make things with them. And I called around sourcing materials, and Abington Art Center said, well, we don't have any vines that need to be pulled out of trees, but we have bamboo. And I thought, bamboo? I don't know anything about it. I don't know what to do with it. I couldn't teach how to use it. And he said, oh, you should come out and take a look at it anyways. And so I drove there, walked out with him, and walked through a forest to this bamboo grove. And I was just awestruck by it. It had these tall culms and these very fine branches and these repeated lines on which now I know are nodes on the canes, and everything was like slightly moving back and forth. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I'm in love. And I started to get all these images coming to my head, and I didn't really understand what they were, but I knew they were like creative images. And the guy said, well, can you do something with it? And I said, oh yeah. And so then I spent the next year tearing it apart, trying to figure out what to do with it.
And at what point did you find you have such a nice way of combining your love of glass and the glass work that you started doing with your bamboo and basketry techniques? At what point in your trajectory of your work did that come together? Was that immediate, or was that a little bit of trial and error?
Well, in undergrad, I was combining glass and leaves and sticks and stuff, but it wasn't so integrated. And I put down the glass for a while, thinking, if I'm going to use glass, it needs to have a personal way in which I'm using it. There needs to be an actual reason why I'm using it. And after I moved to Oregon, and I was in an artist in residency at Oregon College of Arts and Crafts, and that ended, and I needed a job. And my mom suggested I call Bullseye Glass, because that's the glass she used my whole life, and see if they needed some help, because they were having a sale. And They needed help, and I went down there and I stocked shelves, and they stuck me in some classes, and I really enjoyed myself. And I got to work in the research and education department for a couple years, and not only did I get to teach glass classes, but I also got to experiment. And one of the things I did was experiment with something that's like a frit wafer, and it's like firing frit straight on a kiln shelf. And then I turned that into leaves that looked a lot like the flower petals or the maple seeds that I used to put together in order to create pattern. And then I had a little element that I could stitch together the same way that I was stitching together bamboo. And that's how I started to integrate the two together.
Well, I think we'd all love to see some of your work. So I think that's a great segue into you showing us some of the wonderful work that you've been making over the years.
Sure. So I'm just going to show you guys about 10 slides. And the host has disabled screen sharing, it says. So.
Pam's going to switch it over.
Okay.
In the meantime, can you tell us a little bit about, while we're waiting for Pam to do that, when I went to visit you, you really showed me around and taught me about how many different varieties of bamboo there are, which I had no idea about. Do you know how many varieties exist?
So there's a lot. I there might be a couple thousand in the world. I'm not totally sure, but there's always new varieties being made, because when bamboo flowers, it creates, and it only flowers every 80 to 120 years. And when it flowers, it creates seed, and the seeds drop down and they create little babies, and then there's thousands of babies, and some of those have new varieties within them. So there are a lot. There are only a few that I really enjoy working with. And actually I see that I can go ahead and share now. So
Great.
are you guys seeing
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this is a piece that is one of the pieces that one of the pieces I was creating before I started working with bamboo, and it's made out of maple seeds, money plant, and tree bark. And so I glued things together flat, and then I would create a three-dimensional form by bending and sewing things together. And I was gathering my own tree bark at the time. These are two pieces that I created in graduate school. And the one on the left is a stacked piece. So one of the techniques that I developed in graduate school was to cut the bamboo into really tiny little pieces and then stack it. And over time, the stacking has gotten more and more complex. And then another way that I'll put bamboo together is to stitch it together, like in the piece on the right. And the piece on the right is made out of 2,000 pieces of bamboo that are just the node of the bamboo. And they're all stitched together into this sort of suit of armor. This is floating flower, and another way in which I work is to make long strips of bamboo and then to stitch those together. And this is a piece in which I was trying to combine the stacking technique that I do, which is in the center of this boat shape, and then combine that with the strips that I'm stitching together. And incorporated within this are the glass sleeves that I mentioned earlier. And this is a stacked piece, homage to the four directions. And it combines flat pieces of bamboo that are stacked together with round crosscut pieces of bamboo. The other thing I started doing is learning how to laminate and bend bamboo into a frame. And so that's what the outside of this piece is. And this is channel for air. It uses something called a spiraling technique that I've developed over time. And the spiraling technique uses the long split pieces of bamboo. And then depending on how much I curve the bamboo, how many pieces of or elements are within a piece and how long they are can create variations in the form. It's all sewn together. Another thing I'll do is heat bend large bamboo canes. So these bamboo canes are about 1 inch around, and they're heat bent over bicycle wheels. And then I've added split pieces of bamboo into that and glass on it. And this is called Serpens Unda, and it's sort of like a serpent dragon shape that hangs on the wall. This is another one of those spiral pieces using a cobalt blue glass, and it's a much more open and airy form, very light. And in 2019, I had 2 shows, and one of them was at Riversea Gallery in Astoria, Oregon. And I used that same technique that I used with the serpent to create in between 13 and 15 of these wings out of bamboo. And then each of them was a different variety of glass colors. And they're all sort of floating or flying together in the gallery. And then this is from another show that same year, Floss Agri, which means flower field. And these are all the bamboo split strips that are bent into this sort of complex little unit. And then all the units are tied together into a flower shape. And where you see different colors, those are each a different flower. And all the flowers can be combined together into a form on the wall or separated. And this is the final slide in the series. This is Catacomb of Fluctus, and it is also based in my spiraling technique. And I've tied 6 spirals together here or connected them together in order to create this form. And it's at the Crystal Bridges Museum in Bentonville, Arkansas, in conjunction with a show called Crafting America until May 21st. And then that show's scheduled to travel around.
So congratulations on being part of that show. It's a wonderful honor to be included in that.
Thank you.
Do you find that when you have the chance, you enjoy working really large to fill a space? I know that your work started out relatively compact, and it seems to be now growing as you have the opportunity to work in larger spaces. Is that something you hope, a direction that you hope to continue?
Well, I enjoy making big stuff. I kind of think that making the big stuff is a different physical experience to me than making the small stuff. When I'm making large things, I'm stretching out further, using more of my body, and it's very exciting to work in that way. It's very physically challenging too, and I do like to see things large. It is not really practical to continually make large stuff without knowing where it's going. So I have to make sure I have some place that sort of work is going before I make it. And but I also really enjoy making small objects, these intimate small things that people have to come close to look at in order to really get the full sense of it.
Awesome. Do you have time to share with us some video of your bamboo groves? I know that you have a small amount growing at your studio space.
Yes.
I think it would be great to take a tour and just kind of tell us a little bit more about, what's it what's the experience of being in your studio like? If you can kind of describe what your day is like.
Okay, so I'll describe my day and then I'll show you my bamboo grove. And I had to record the bamboo grove in advance because not only does my Wi-Fi drop in and out, but also I have chickens, and they will try to escape when I open up their chicken coop. And I didn't want that to happen live, and it actually happened during a recording. So we're doing some recorded stuff there. So my studio day is, I have a kid, so we get up, I make his breakfast. We're homeschooling right now. So I do about an hour's worth of emails and marketing and whatever sort of business stuff there is to do in the morning. And then I come out to the studio and I'm here for about 9 hours. There is a lunch in the middle of there, nice long lunch with my kiddo. But this work requires an intense amount of time because it is all stitched and sewn and tied together. But you know, I do take breaks, and one of the things I do when I take breaks is I go out and I sit with the chickens. There's a log out there and I pet my chickens, and my son and I, you know, take a walk. I help him with his homework. So it's sort of all kind of hodgepodge mixed together during COVID time, but it's quite fun. I'm gonna share the video with you, and let me find it. Here it is. Okay, so you guys can see the video, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So this is the big part of my garden, and that's the front of my studio, and my house is like 6 feet from it. That is a Chesca aculeo cana prieta. It's a South American clumping bamboo that gets full sun, and it will get about 15 feet. And right there is my vegetable garden, and it is fenced in by bamboo that is sort of rejects from the studio, because the dog will try and run into the garden, and a hoop house with all of about half of the 250 vegetable plants for this year. And here's a little gate made out of bamboo. And then here's my chickens. There's 13 of them because right now we're fostering 3. And the fence here is also built out of bamboo. And in the background is moso, which is, it's also called, it's a Phylostachys. It's a timber bamboo. It can get 40 feet tall and 5 or 6 inches around. Mine is relatively, I had to throw chicken feed so that they would move away from the gate. There they are. They're so happy. They have the rule of the roost here in the bamboo groves. So that's the moso. And then all down the side of the studio are 2 different types of black bamboo. Nigra bori, which has a speckled surface to it, and that's what this is. And then Nigra, which is a black bamboo. And I have an even amount of planting of each, and these have been there for about 6 years. And there's not enough for me to be able to supply all of my bamboo or source all of my bamboo that I'm using out of there, but there is enough that if I'm like, oh, I just need this one bamboo cane to do this one thing, I can go out and I can find it. I could probably build 1 piece a year out of the grove right at the moment. But most of my bamboo I get from community sources, people who've seen my work and know I like bamboo, and they invite me to come to their property and get their bamboo. It's a great community building experience.
So for anybody who's ever had to deal with bamboo where they didn't want it, how are you controlling that your entire neighborhood isn't covered in bamboo? Because my understanding of bamboo is that it just spreads like crazy.
Yeah. So there is a great website called Bamboo Nursery, or Bamboo Garden. It's Bamboo Garden Nursery. It's out in North Plains, Oregon. And Lindsay, when you were here, I brought you here and we went around.
It was amazing.
There, 26 acres. Anyways, they have a great page on their website that talks about how to control bamboo. And what I do is I have a pruning trench around the bamboo, and and there's wood chips in there, although the chickens have kind of kicked the wood chips out. So I have to go in and dig up the rhizomes or the roots that are going past my pruning trench twice a year. And that keeps it from spreading further. So it's a root pruning process.
Oh, that's interesting. Great. You want to take us on a tour of your studio?
Sure.
Sorry for the cat. It's really exciting just to see it as is, but being able to see some of it in more detail would be wonderful.
Yeah. Okay. So here is the studio. It's about 20 by 40 feet, and it's got lots of space to hang artwork in the ceiling, thank goodness. And first thing I'm going to show you is my teaching samples. So I take these when I travel to teach, and some of these are from Japan, some of them are from here. Those were bamboo types. This is how to cut bamboo into different shapes, surface techniques, ways to tie bamboo together, ways to bend bamboo, how to peg bamboo, using cross-cut pieces of bamboo, and then several different surface patterns. And this is for a class that I developed a couple years ago. And then here's two teaching examples, and the one on the left is a class that I was supposed to teach in a couple different places over the course of this year. And I think I had about 4 or 5 different classes scheduled, and they were all canceled. So I put that class online on Thinkific. And then this is the desk where I do all of my desk work. And these are wall pieces, those flowers like the Floss Agri series. And there's some lamps. Up here are molds that I use to either heat bend bamboo or to, just gonna stop for a second, or to create the bamboo laminate heat bent frames. And then this is my glass working area. I have a kiln. It's a Paragon GL24, holds a 24 by 24 inch kiln shelf. And I think it's kind of amazing that all of the glass work that I do and put in my pieces comes out of that tiny little kiln. And then there's frit of different colors. And that red table is where I do all my glass cutting. And then the stove is where I heat prepare bamboo. So bamboo needs to be heated and have an starchy oil removed from it in order to create a more archival material to work with. So I put smaller pieces in the oven for 20 minutes at 300 degrees. And that's also how I heat bend smaller pieces of bamboo. This is the wood shop area, and I've got a bandsaw, 2 Dremel tools, a drill press, and a belt sander, and then some equipment that vacuums the sawdust, and another work table. And this has done me really well for about, for the last 20 years. I'd love to have a bigger bandsaw, but I love this little messy space. I've got lots of clamps on the wall and saws, and I can see bamboo outside of my window. This piece here is similar to the piece that was at the museum in Arkansas, the Crafting America show. And this has, I think, 8 spirals that I'm connecting together. So I've sewn all the spirals to each other, but the edges of the part where it's not spirals have not been connected together. So it looks like a big mess, and it's a puzzle I'm trying to figure out. I don't have all the answers to this one yet, but I'm looking forward to finding them. And so this is a view of the studio from the other side. I've got lots of storage, tiny little parts, different tools, and some of the parts I'll never use, but I gotta keep them all. Uh, this is the bamboo that is waiting to be used. Some of it will be rejected and used in the garden, and I'll go gather more. And then I've got work inventory from the past 20 years. Some of it's destined to go somewhere else. Some of it's just sort of in my private collection. And what's coming up here is a teaching sample, that round basket. And that's feather back with the feathery look to it. I have a line of jewelry, so I have an area when people visit the studio, they can try on jewelry. And there's a teapot from a teapot show. And then I have an Etsy store, so those are little cups for the Etsy. And then this is a piece that I just finished. I've been working on it since November. I call it Cloud of Shells, and it's destined to go to a private home in Tennessee, in the ceiling of their living room with lights in it. And the hardest part, of course, was this 8-foot long piece. It has an armature that runs through it. But the more I worked on it, the heavier and heavier it got. And then this is the table where I prepare my materials. And it's a three-part process used to prepare my bamboo strips. There's 3 different knife blades that I'm using to get each piece the same thickness and width.
Where did you learn you're using like traditional methods of preparing bamboo, and did somebody teach that to you, or there are artists who have shared their knowledge of bamboo?
Yeah, I feel really lucky and very grateful for the knowledge that was shared with me. When I first started working with bamboo, there wasn't the internet. I mean, there was, but it was like a black screen with green type, and so research had to happen in the library, and the only thing I found was that are like skeletal structures were built in China in conjunction with rattan, and bamboo fishing poles, they were using epoxy while making them. So that was the knowledge I had. And I spent 2 years working, or a year and a half working with it. And my knowledge was basically physical research that I was doing. And when I moved here to Oregon, Nancy Moore-Best introduced me to Jiro Yanazawa, who is a Japanese trained bamboo basket maker. And he was living here with his wife here in Beaverton, and he invited me over to his studio. And I took a bamboo knife that I had bought at a bamboo meeting. There's like bamboo societies all throughout the United States. And I bought this knife and I had no idea how to use it. I've been using a chisel and a hammer, and he showed me in about a 10-minute demonstration how he uses his bamboo knife to split his bamboo. And so I was like, gonna try. And he goes, "Oh no, you have to go to your own studio and do it." I'm sure it was a liability thing. Because it can be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. It really takes some training to be able to use it. And I practiced with that knife for about a year, and then he was going to Japan, and he asked me if I wanted anything, and the tools that are used to create the width and thickness of the bamboo is what I wanted. And Ned Jakewith, who owns Bamboo Garden Bamboo Nursery, bought a piece of mine so I could afford to give Jiro the money to buy the tools in Japan. I mean, it was a very sweet. Ned has been
Really nice.
such a big mentor in that way, making sure that I get to make what I want to make while he was alive. And then Jiro was just so generous in showing me little tidbits of information along the way, over the course of about, I don't know, was it 6 years or 8 years? I'd get like, oh, you can dye bamboo, and or you can, oh, here you can heat bend bamboo. And every time I'd say, I wish bamboo would do this or that, he'd be like, oh, but it can.
It's amazing that you can take such a straight, sturdy material and you take it and make it look so fluid in the way that you put your forms together. It's really wonderful to see. I think what people would be surprised by is how much time is of your studio time is spent processing the material versus how much is spent actually creating the work, because it's clear that this work is very labor intensive once the material is processed. But can you let everybody in on how much is actually involved in processing the material itself?
Yeah, so when we were talking before, I I think that it's about the 80% preparation of material and 20% construction. And the whole time I'm doing the material preparation, I've got it in my head like, oh, I can't wait to use it and do this thing with it. And it fuels me through to the construction part. And, the material prep is going out into the grove and gathering the material, washing it, taking off the branches, heat preparing it, either with a propane tank outside sitting down or in the oven if I'm using little short pieces, and then splitting a bamboo cane into half and then half and then half and then half. So I end up with 16 strips, splitting the skin away from the inside, taking each strip through the planing knives that are wedged into a log. And then that makes each one the same width. And then the same thickness is another planer. And then I use pruning shears to cut them down to the right size. And then there's sanding the ends, and then there's heat bending. And then I get to sew it all together.
And all of that before you even start creating the piece.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit more about how you are actually constructing this work? Because it is difficult to see at a distance all of the really amazing stitch work that you are doing to keep all of this, all of these bamboo strips together into the form that you're going for.
So I'm using a simple knot to stitch everything together. And it's just tie it, stick a piece of bamboo in, tie it. But, and I love the simplicity of that. And even with the flowers that I do on the wall, that is just a simple tying. But there are other stitching techniques that I'm doing that help hold things together. Like when I want to make a surface plane where it's strips together. This is one of the things I'll do, which is a blanket stitch where I'm blanket stitching strip to strip to strip. And another thing that I'll do is lashing. So this is two pieces of bamboo with strips, and then it's lashed together. So that's another one. And it's a really simple technique. And some of the techniques I got out of like a bookbinding book, and some of them were, a knot is just a knot. We all learned that. I learned how to make knots and when I was like 6, and my mom said, here, tie fishing line onto these Christmas ornaments I made. So I made like 5 cents per ornament. And this is a teapot that I've made, and it uses knotless netting to stitch it together. So these are cross-cut pieces of bamboo that have been glued to a very thick paper, and then I've carved out all of the centers of these, and then I've made this shape of this handle, and then I stitch, and I hope the camera is focusing.
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay, good. So that's all stitched together with knotless netting, and it's really one of my favorite, really versatile stitches. It can be stitched really close together and create like a solid type of fabric in a way, or really far apart and make a very lacy shape. So, that's
my favorite stitch as well.
I know.
Love that stitch. Could you talk, I'm curious, how are you actually combining the glass? Are you drilling through the glass and then stitching through it? Or do you have other ways that you're incorporating that?
So I'm trying to see if there's anything close I can. So one of the things that I'm doing is I'm making those little leaves, and those little leaves, they're like, I'm trying to think of how many different processes. I think it's like 5 steps to get to the point where I can use them. And in one of the steps, what I do is I take a diamond embedded bandsaw and I'm making little slits in them so that they have a place for thread to go around. And when I'm making the flowers, those are made out of frit balls, and frit balls are where I take cut sheet glass that's little squares, I put it in the kiln, heat it up to 1500 degrees, and it turns into these little like half balls that kind of look like half a hamburger bun. And I take 2 half hamburger buns and I glue them together, and if you look, there's like an undercut around there, and that's where I wrap my thread around. So it's a pretty simple, 2 very simple things that can be used to make complex looking structures. And there's actually a piece right here that has
Okay.
the frit wafers on it. So this is a spiral that I made, gosh, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. And these are the frit wafers. So this is vanilla colored glass with an amber colored glass over the top of it. And it starts out flat on the kiln shelf. That's the first firing. And then I have to grind all the edges because they're not perfect like this. And then slump them and then make the little cuts in them.
Lots of steps.
Yeah, lots of steps.
So I noticed when you were showing us your latest commission, I have 2 questions about it. One is, could you talk a little bit about your design process, and maybe even specifically when you're relating to a client who's asked for you to create something? Are you sketching things out, or is it a collaboration between you and the client?
Well, tiny bit of a collaboration, but generally when people contact me, they've seen something on my website or on my Instagram or whatever that is something that they're interested in, like a form, one of the forms that they're interested in. And so I get contacted, I ask them what do they like? What is it they're, they might have a space in mind and they might already have a piece in mind that they saw, but can I make it bigger? Can I make it smaller? Can I, what are their options? And so I let them know what the options are, and then I create sketches. And depending on what type of piece it is, I can hand draw it, but some of the pieces like the spirals are very hard to hand draw and have look good to me for a client. So I'll actually take a photograph of my of a piece, I'll print it out, and then I'll sketch the parts of that printout or trace the parts of that I want onto a piece of paper, and then I'll sketch the rest. So it's like a hybrid drawing. And then another thing I'll do is I'll Photoshop things. I'll like cut off a part of one piece in Photoshop and a part of another piece in Photoshop and smash them together and make it look like one piece. So there's several different ways to do it. But another thing I'll do is I'll send in like color samples of glass and then also samples of different types of bamboo so that there are options. And there's generally, in between 5 and 20 emails back and forth before there's a project in process. And of course, I ask for a deposit and there is a contract and everything. And that's a lot of work that's prep work before the prep work is even done. But it's worth it to be able to make something and send it out into the world, and also support my kiddo with it.
Well, we're so fortunate that you just finished the commission that is behind you.
Yeah.
And I know that's exciting that we're getting to see it before it ships out. I don't even want to think about how you have to build crates or whatnot in order to ship that.
Yeah.
But I also noticed when you were touring us past that, that each of those sculptural forms has a light inside. Is, is are they able to be shown that way
Yeah.
during this presentation? I think it would be great to see. I just imagine the amazing shadows that must cast.
Yeah, so they're going to be hung in a ceiling with lights in them in the client's home, and I can't believe it's going to a private space, but they're going to enjoy it. Anyways, I took a video of it, and it is right here.
Wow.
So the side effect of this is that it has great shadows, and although they aren't going to turn in the space, I noticed when I turn them that the shadows sort of dance. So my next thing that I'm going to be trying to do for myself personally is to see if there's some sort of mechanism where a piece can spin, but the electrical cord doesn't. Like, how do I automate it? So that's going to take some Google research. I'm sure there's something out there in the world that does that. The client wanted the top of the middle piece to be solid and the bottom to be lacy. The bottom has a bunch of glass in it.
And the way that they're hanging in your studio, is that the configuration that will be in the home?
No, that's what I can do with the space that I have
Yeah.
here. I just did a photo session here, and we should have done it in the photographer's studio, where I'm like, wow, we really are maxed out on space here. It's hard to believe, but I know that the long one's going to be in the middle, and then the other ones are going to be 360 around it and sort of staggered a little bit. And I will be getting photos of that once it's installed. They've promised professional photos, so I'll be sure to share
Beautiful.
those on social media and probably in my email newsletter.
Well, is there anything else that you want to share with everybody? I know that we have some questions that people have been writing in.
I can't think of anything.
Pam, are there some questions from some people in the chat? Oh, you're muted.
Okay, now I'm not muted. First of all, somebody asked early on, do you know where Crafting America is going after Arkansas?
I don't. I looked on the website last week, and it was still like a to be determined. So I would just check back in with the website.
And did they ask you to create a piece, or did they choose a piece that already existed?
Yeah, they chose the piece that was with Rooted, Reinvented, and Reimagined. And that had been touring for like a
4
really long
years.
time.
Yeah.
And the piece sold. And the woman who owned the piece, I just didn't have the heart to like contact her and say, like, can you do without your piece for another like year or 2 or 3? And so I asked the museum if they would be okay if I created a new piece for the exhibition, and they were, yeah, fine. So it's definitely a different piece than the one that was in Rooted, Reinvented, but it's more of an open form. But yeah, they invited me, and I created the piece for the exhibition.
And for anybody who doesn't know, that Rooted, Revived, Reinvented was an NBO exhibition that we were really proud to be a part of. It was about 4 years that traveled to museums throughout the country. What is your favorite heat source for bending the bamboo? Does it really depend on the size, like the scale of the piece that you're trying to bend, whether you're using the oven versus some other form?
Yeah, so for heat bending, I'll use the oven if I'm making 300 of one thing and it's only 12 inches long. Like it depends on if it can fit in the oven. And if I'm making a lot of something, I'm going to put it in the oven because it is labor intensive to stand there with a heat gun, which is my other source that I use. And a heat gun looks like a hair dryer, but you would never use it for your hair. And I'll sit there with the heat gun and just run it back and forth like this over where I'm trying to heat bend for anywhere from a minute to 5 minutes, depending on how long or how big a round of a piece that I'm trying to bend.
Now, in addition to bending bamboo with heat, do you have to, does bamboo always have to be dried before you use it? Can you use it green?
You can use it green, and it depends on what process I'm gonna do with it. If I'm making strips, actually splitting it down when it's green or freshly cut is the best thing because it's the easiest, and it's actually easier to store bamboo when it's, little flat pieces rather than big round pieces. And bamboo can be split even when it's like a couple 100 years dry. Like this piece of bamboo, this is a piece of smoked bamboo from Japan, and it was in the ceiling of a rafter. I mean, the rafter in a ceiling of a Japanese farmhouse. And, they heated things on a charcoal stove, and over the years, it would toast the bamboo or sort of cure it. So, this is something that in Japan, the smoked bamboo, and these canes can be, a couple 100 years old, they're split and used. So you can have something that's a couple 100 years old and still split it the same way you could split something that is fresh. It's just a little more challenging.
Are you often asked to make lighting, or was this commission the first time that you really dove into combining a light source?
So I've put light in other things, and there's actually, excuse me, a couple classes that I've taught where we've made lamps as the class. But this is probably it's the biggest project I've ever done, but it's also the first one where it's more of an upscale type of lighting situation. And part of the agreement in that commission was that they have their own lighting designer work on the electrical parts of it because I didn't really want the liability of it. The lights that I have in this are from IKEA.
IKEA is always good.
They work well. The bulbs are like this big. They're gorgeous.
Since we didn't really get into any hands-on watching you do any work, are there any videos on your website, or do you put videos, or do people have access to workshops or anything where they could watch you work or learn more about what your techniques are?
Yeah, so I do have a YouTube channel. There's not much on it, but there is some stuff. And then there's a class that I developed online once the pandemic hit, and it's on Thinkific, which I think you shared a link to, and it has like, I don't know, a good 80 videos that are processes that can be used on bamboo, and it talks about heat prep and bamboo bending and just a bunch of stuff. And then I do teach privately, and I've done some classes through Zoom privately. And, that's mostly, if it's not in person, it's mostly going to be demonstration based when it comes to working with bamboo. What else? Those are the ways to do it when it's not in person, is either through Zoom, private class, or the class I've already created.
I think it's really interesting. The pandemic kind of threw us all for a loop, but a lot of artists have really found some really fantastic ways to generate income through these online workshops. And I know that we do have some questions from individuals who are artists who have kids. And I know, you know, you have a son. And would you say that there's one source of social media that is more reliable for producing income from your work? Do you find that Etsy is a solid source for you, or that these teaching these virtual workshops, or is that something that you're just kind of getting into now?
So the teaching has sort of taken a backseat during the pandemic for me. I created the class online at the beginning, and I had a couple people register for it, and then I had to move on after I think I had 2 months that were kind of iffy, and then I had some commission work come in. And um, the thing that's been like the most reliable source of income is making and selling the work, either through private commissions or art consultants or interior designers have been really great to work with. And Etsy doesn't work well for me because I don't put very much time into it. And really, it's a place to sell either the jewelry or little parts like that are from the kit, the teaching kit, like someone wants extra glass or the little O-rings. I sell those on Etsy. So that doesn't really, that makes me like $10 a month.
It is a
But
lot of work to make
yeah,
it.
I ask people when they approach me, like, where did you hear about my work? And the thing that comes up more than anything else, which was kind of astounding to me, was Pinterest. I had no idea, but interior designers and art consultants love Pinterest because it's a great way to research images.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So
Yeah.
there's another question here. Do you do anything with the Japanese knotweed?
No, I know that that is, I think that's more invasive than bamboo, but I haven't worked with it.
Okay.
And what would be your advice, like if somebody is really inspired by seeing what you can do with bamboo? Because I mean, your work is so amazing and just
Yeah.
so inspiring. Um, do you have any advice on how somebody could get started?
So, when I got started, I didn't have any information, and all I had was a saw, a chisel, and a hammer, and a pair of pruners. And I do think that there's something to be said for researching your very own self, what you can do with it. You're going to get the most creativity out of something like that. And after you've figured out your the own little secrets that bamboo is going to reveal to you by just getting your hands on it, or any material, just getting your novice hands on it and working with it, is going to produce a lot. And then find some skills. And I have to say that nowadays the internet has so much to offer in terms of videos and such. I mean, there's not only do I teach, but there's particularly that I can think of one artist in Japan who is offering bamboo basket classes online. His name's Shigeo Kawashima. And so there are people out there that can definitely teach. And in non-pandemic times, I fly all over to teach and show, you know, how to split bamboo and what to do with it.
There's a
And
couple more questions here. One is there a best time of year to gather?
Yes. So you want to gather during the dry season, and that's because there's less starch in the bamboo. So early in the spring, after the rains have stopped, before the bamboo starts sending up shoots, is one of the times. But the best time would be after the bamboo shoots have hardened off, sort of mid to late summer, August, before the rains start. And now that is here in Oregon, and that's the environment that I'm familiar with. But Jiro has also told me during the dry season. So even over in Japan, that's when they're getting their bamboos during the dry season.
So
Are there artists that you would point people to look at their work that you particularly admire who are using materials similar to what you're using?
Yeah, so if you haven't visited Thai Modern Gallery website in Santa Fe, New Mexico, it is a definite must. They carry work from bamboo artists from Japan, and they're so knowledgeable about like the background of the work and the artists and their lineage, like who they've learned from. And I really feel like just looking at a bamboo basket is almost like reading a textbook about some other thing, because the structure of the bamboo, the physical anatomy of the bamboo shows up in the baskets. You can see like, oh, that's where that part of the plant was. And oh, look, it bent this way. It's just really fabulous. And then another person to check out would be Tanabe Chikunsai, who is this fantastic artist in Japan and is doing these very large installations where him and his team weave together long bamboo strips, which he recycles and uses for other installations. But they're these, tornadoes of swirling bamboo. They're just beautiful.
Sounds amazing. I know that you had a chance to go to Japan on an interesting trip.
Yeah.
Did you get to see any of those in person?
Yeah. So I didn't get to see any of those installations in person, but I did get to visit Tanabe Chikunsai's studio. And I visited several people's studios actually. And someday I think I need to just give a presentation on that because it was a really great trip. But I was in Tanabe's tea house and got to see his artwork, his grandfather's, his great grandfather's artwork, like 4 generations of artists, or 3 generations of artists, all in one room. And he invited my son and I to spend a day with his class. He teaches class in his studio once a week. And we made baskets together. It was just really, it was a special, sweet, endearing time. And
Amazing.
then I visited Jiro Yanazawa's studio and property, and we stayed there with him for a week. And he took us to meet a bunch of other bamboo artists. And most treasured for me was getting to meet bamboo artists who were women and who were mothers. There aren't that many of those here in the United States. So getting to meet someone that had that much similarity to me was just really touching.
Well, I know that in-person workshops are sort of coming back now that the world is starting to turn back to a new normal, but more resembling what it used to. And I know that everybody wants to know if you have any teaching scheduled, and I will just personally say that I have my fingers crossed you'll be teaching at Touchstone Center for Crafts in the next year or two. But do you have anything already on your calendar that you could let people know about?
I'm sorry, I don't, because I think that like arts organizations are just starting to open up again and figure out like, what's our calendar look like for the next couple of years. But I do have that class online on Thinkific. And then once a year, I do a workshop in my studio during spring break in March. And it's a 4-day workshop, and it's bamboo basics. And we go out to the bamboo farm and gather bamboo. So that'll be next March.
I think I might have to sign up for that.
That would be so fun.
Well, I think that's about all the time that we have. Am I right on that, Pam?
you are, and I was just gonna pop back in vocally, and thank everyone. I hope you all enjoyed this program as much as I did. I want to thank Charissa and Lindsay for spending the time with us and all the work you all put into this program, because there are practice sessions and more practice sessions and then sessions that don't work until we get to this one. So, it is a process. A recording of this will be available, a video, on our website at nationalbasketry.org sometime next week. And once again, you can donate to help support NBO Presents. There was a link in the chat, or you can just go to our homepage and there's a donate link right on the top there. And see everyone hopefully at our next NBO Presents. Thank you all for coming. And